Can we thank our worship team this morning? Woo! Well, good morning. How does it feel to feel like a cold, wet rat in December? I just so appreciated the invitation to come and share with you, and also just the songs leading up to this morning. I want to talk about what does it mean to follow Jesus to rest. Following Jesus to rest. We're going to be in Matthew 11:28-30, a very familiar passage. But let me just do this. I'll just invite you to open your hands, just close your eyes. I'm going to read this from the Amplified translation, and I just want you to let the words soak into you, wash over you, and then we'll invite Jesus to do his work. Jesus said this, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavily burdened by religious rituals that provide no peace, and I will give you rest, refreshing your souls with salvation. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, following me as my disciple. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest, renewed, blessed, quiet for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and my burden is light." Jesus, we want to follow you to rest every day of our lives in this chaotic world. So I just declare and speak out your rest right now. That your word would instruct us, that your spirit would empower us to not just hear it, but live it for you. Live it with you. Would you join us this morning for your glory? Amen. So in this familiar passage, Jesus gives two invitations and one promise. He says, "Come to me," first invitation. He says, "Take up my yoke upon you," second invitation. And then the promise, "You will find rest." Jesus' first words to his disciples recorded in the Gospels are, "Come." And I always like talking about Jesus as if he's always inviting us. And I think he's always inviting us to come. The disciples, Andrew and Peter, when they first saw Jesus, they said, "Hey, Rabbi, where are you staying?" Jesus' answer, "Come and see. Come." And then when he invites them to be his disciples, he says, "Come and follow me." And so Jesus extends this invitation to these fishermen to leave their lives for a life of discipleship, apprenticeship to Jesus. And that's the first invitation of discipleship. It's an invitation to imitation. When Jesus says to us and to his disciples, "Come," he's saying, "I'm your rabbi, you're the apprentice, learn from me." And he says that even in this text that we read. He says, "Learn from me, follow me as my disciple." And of course, the rabbi's job 2,000 years ago and today is to teach the Torah to his students, to his Talmidim. That's where we get the word disciple. But it's not just teaching Torah in a very intellectual way. It's not just teaching through at the synagogues on Saturday, but it's teaching through his life every day. And Jesus says, "Come learn from me, come imitate your life after me." And these guys literally drop their nets, they leave their lives, they follow him, they stay with him, they sleep where he sleeps, they eat where he eats, and they live a life following Jesus. There's even this idea from the 2nd century about following in the dust of your rabbi, that you walk so closely along the dirt path behind your rabbi that his dust gets on you. You spend so much time with him that there's this kind of union. So I want to ask this morning, when people look at your lives, can they see the dust of Jesus on you? And I could say, I see the dust of Jesus on many of you. And I know that his dust is on every single one of you. I see the dust of Jesus on Norm as he pours out the kingdom of God to people. I see it on Victor as he serves at CityLink faithfully with a smile and with such a servant heart and attitude. I see the dust of Jesus on Janine, who not just handles admin like a boss, but leads humbly and confidently like Jesus. And I just want to say this, Janine. You can discern it later. I just want to say, you're not just going to prepare other people to be guest speakers at conferences. I believe one day you're going to be the guest speaker at a conference. I see Jesus. I see Jesus's dust on Lori as she continues to serve humbly nurses who attended to Bob at the hospital. I see Jesus and Pastor Fausto and Jorge as they faithfully serve Agua de Vida, trial after trial, setback after setback. I see Jesus's dust on you. Following Jesus begins with the invitation to come. But in this passage, it's the only place in the Gospels where Jesus uniquely says, come to me. Not just follow me, not just come and see, but come to me. See, it's not just an invitation of imitation. It's an invitation of intimacy. Because when you've spent every single day following your rabbi, mimicking what he does, copying what he does, eating like he does, there's no way that you can't be intimate with him, that you don't know him experientially in an intimate way. And look what the invitation, who it's for. He says, come to me all who are weary and burdened. Can we just be honest? I think we're all tired. We're all burdened. We've felt the heaviness of almost 2 intense years. And I think we have to recognize our own weaknesses and be honest enough to admit, Jesus, I don't have this. And if you're prideful and self-righteous like I am, that's kind of hard to do, because I want to keep going in my own strength. But Jesus says, come to me if you're weary. The question is, will we admit it, that we need Jesus and we can't do it on our own? And I think the people who came to Jesus the most readily were those who realized they were most weary. They were weary, they were tired of being sick and tired, and of their sin and their oppression, their rejection, their idols. They were tired. And I think God's always been waiting for us to declare our dependence on him and to trade our insufficiency for his sufficiency. So what burdens, friends, are you weighed down with? What has caused you to be weary in this season? It's a lot, probably. I think sometimes we create our own burdens. And, we get, what gets us tired and feeling heavy is just really trying to live life our way or the world's way instead of Jesus's way. And I know this all too well. As I was preparing for this, I had a conversation with my best friend from Canada. He's a pastor, and I was talking about Thanksgiving. I'm like, yeah, I really should have been more thankful. I really should live a life of gratitude. And he stopped me and he said, Jeremiah, so often when I talk with you, it feels like that you're carrying this heavy burden. And I'm like, Jesus, are you trying to give me an illustration right now from my own life? Because I don't like this, where this is going. He's like, you just feel you ought to, you should. And if I'm honest with you guys, he's right. I so often live under my own burden of shoulds. Man, I really should be spirit-filled like Dan Sneed and Lori and Karina and Pastor Bob. Man, I really should be spirit-filled like that. I really should be more grateful. Oh, yeah, I really should spend more time in my devotions. I really should. And I live under this burden of shoulds. How about you? And it's heavy. And I can't even bear it. Only Jesus can. And the reality is that these are voices of shame and guilt. And the beautiful thing of the gospel is that Jesus, the high King of heaven, came down and took the burden of every single one of us in the whole world, past, present, future, and he carried it on himself. He took the cross as a yoke of heaviness for our sin so that we wouldn't be burdened any longer. Isn't that good news? Come on, shout somebody. So what do you do when you're yoked, when you're burdened by things of the world, things of your own heaviness? The invitation is to come. Come to Jesus. He says, come to me, not a system, not a church, not evangelicalism, not a dogma, not a theology. Come to a person. Come to the person, the only one who can give us rest. The invitations for us, friends, today, come. Come. And I think so many of us have been burdened, and we're like, how do we get this burden off? And it's interesting because the answer Jesus gives is not what we expect. What we think, what we want is just escape. We just want relief. I don't want to wear anything. I don't want to lift anything. But Jesus doesn't give us an escape. He gives us equipment. People have wanted to escape the burdens of this world and of this life. But instead of Jesus giving us an escape from this world, he gives us equipment to live in this world, full of brokenness and hardship and trials. And he knew it was going to be hard, but he says, let me give you something. Let me allow you to carry something that will help you get through. It's not just walking with nothing on. It's walking with the right thing that will help us in this world, and that's his yoke. He says, come to me. It's the invitation of intimacy, the invitation of imitation. And then he says, take my yoke upon you. You want to get through life. It's hard. It's difficult. Yes, you can't escape it. But let me help you. Take my yoke. Exchange your burdens for my yoke. Every rabbi has a yoke. Then and now. It represents his set of teachings. It's his way of teaching and embodying Torah. And so if you want to know what a rabbi believes, just look at his yoke. Look at his way of living out Torah. Jesus says, my yoke is easy. That word easy in Greek can mean kind or good. We're like, Jesus, how can you give me something that would be easy and good? 1 John 5:3 says this, for the love of God, this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. Aren't you glad that the commandments of God are not burdensome? They don't weigh us down with weight, they lift us up. 1 John 3:23 tells us what the yoke of Jesus is. This kind, easy yoke, what is it? It says, this is his commands, that we believe in the name of his Son, Jesus the Messiah, and love one another just as he commanded. So what's the yoke that allows us to get through life in its hardships and burdens? It's loving faithfulness to Jesus and loving service to people. The yoke is love. The way to follow Jesus in this hard world full of trials and tribulations, it's the yoke of Jesus, which is the yoke of grace. It's a yoke of grace. Grace, God's power in us to do what we can't do without him. And that's the difference between a Christian trying to please God and being burdened with his own set of ways of following God versus a Christian who's following the way of Jesus, who yokes himself to Jesus and is empowered by grace. What's the yoke that you're wearing today? Does it feel heavy and burdensome? Then it's not Jesus' yoke, friends. His yoke is kind and light. It's a yoke of grace where we're in union with him, where grace empowers us and Jesus is pulling us. Jesus this morning is inviting us to come to him, to imitate our lives. He's our rabbi. We're his apprentice. We come to him. We follow him to become like him. And in this hard world where we have troubles, we take on his yoke. We release our burdens. We follow the easy yoke of Jesus of loving God and loving people, empowered by grace. The question is, how then do we walk that out? John Mark Comer says, if you want to experience the life of Jesus, you need to adopt the lifestyle of Jesus. If you want to experience Jesus' life in you, you need practices, you need lifestyle of Jesus in you. And so if I could think of one way in which Jesus lived to bring such an ease of rest for him and for those who would follow him, I think of the Sabbath. I think of Shabbat, Sabbath. And he practiced this, and this is one way that we can yoke ourselves to Jesus through grace. 2 times in this passage, Jesus promises us rest. He says, you will have rest for your souls. I will give you rest. And the idea of finding rest for our soul, our entire selves, inward and outward, it's captured in this word, shalom. We're all familiar with this word, shalom. One commentator said this about shalom. He says, in the Bible, shalom means, listen, universal flourishing, wholeness, and delight. In other words, shalom is the way things ought to be. It's the restoration of the way things ought to be. Jesus is called the Sar Shalom, the Prince of Peace. That's what Shane spoke about this last weekend. So he is the essence of rest. He is the essence of peace, the way things are meant to be. And one of the best ways to practically live out rest in Jesus, I think, is actually taking a Sabbath rest, Shabbat. And the word literally means to stop or to cease, but it can also mean delight. And so God creates the world in 6 days, and he could have just called it quits and then said it's all done. But he didn't. He made another day, not for anything except to rest. Not because God was breaking a sweat, right? He wasn't tired. He set something in motion to pattern, I think, for us. He rested and he blessed this day and he set it apart. Now, you got to ask yourself, why would God set something apart? So that it could be special, so that we could enter into it. And I think so, before Sabbath was even commanded in the law, it was patterned in creation. He patterns this rest and this blessing. So you might ask yourself, well, Jeremiah, why do I need a whole day of rest? I mean, come on. You know, we're in the age of grace, and, you know, Sabbath is any time I just stop on my phone, or, you know, here's the deal. It's God's day, so you can argue with him if you want, all you want, but it's his day and it's unto him. It's a Sabbath unto him. And he didn't just give it to the Jewish people. I believe he gave it to humanity, because in the new heavens and the new earth, it's going to be one big Shabbat. It's going to be one big Sabbath rest. And I think if God rested and if he created a whole day to enjoy and delight in his creation, wouldn't it stand to reason that we should follow him and have a whole day of just rest and enjoyment in his creation? And the reason Shabbat was commanded is because the Israelites spent 400 years in slavery in Egypt. They didn't get Labor Day off. Every day was a Labor Day. They didn't get vacations. Paycom wasn't working back then. But God had to command it to them because when they were free, the slave driver was still in them. Friends, we live in a world full of slave drivers. Screens, speed, social media. Don't tell me you're not addicted to your phone. We all are. Hi, I'm Jeremiah, and I'm addicted to my phone. Thank you. Let's just be honest. Thank you. I receive your grace. But we live in a world that doesn't stop. And God says, I want you to stop so that you can remember who's your creator and who's the creation. Because sometimes I think we get the order reversed. I can create. I'll just do another post. I'll just do another thing. I'll just do another errand. And we are driven by our slave drivers. We need Sabbath rest because the Sabbath is like a governor on the speed of life. It keeps us in check and going out of control. The Sabbath rest is a shadow of our rest in Jesus. Listen how Jesus fulfilled Shabbat. He was crucified right before the Sabbath. He was resurrected right after the Sabbath. So what does that mean? On that Sabbath day 2,000 years ago, Jesus was working intercession for us, redeeming the sins of the whole world on that day. Don't tell me that day is not important. Jesus bought your redemption on that Sabbath day. Why wouldn't we want to enter into it and enter into him on that day? John Mark Comer says that Sabbath is more than just a day. It's a way of being in the world. It's a spirit of restfulness that comes from abiding in the Father's loving presence all week long. So Sabbath points us back to the garden, where it was the way it was supposed to be. Mankind was living in shalom with them and with him. And it points us toward the new heavens and the new earth, where again it will be just like it was supposed to be, where we're living in total rest, wholeness with each other. Jesus told us that he's the Lord of the Sabbath. He also told us that Sabbath was made for us. So why would we want to argue with him and not take a full day to enjoy? So let me give you just some practical things as we follow Jesus to rest, especially in this season of craziness and too many Christmas parties and too much spending on our card that goes boop, declined. Thanks for your honesty, Shane. It works, yeah. So here's a good golden rule for as you think about putting your own Shabbat together. Disengage from the have-tos and engage in the get-tos. Stop doing the things that you think, oh, I just have to do that. Oh, God, I have to go to the laundromat. I have to go to Target to get No. Shabbat is not for the have-tos, it's for the get-tos. Oh, I get to sit down with a cup of coffee and just read a novel. I get to go mountain biking. That might be restful for Shane. It would not be restful for me. So the idea is whatever you get to do that on the Sabbath and do it with Jesus. Here, and a good grid for you as you consider what should I do, what should I not do? Rest and worship. Rest and worship. What is restful to me and what is worshipful to God? If you love running, God bless you. If that's not work for you and you're not training for a marathon, go for a run. Feel God's pleasure. I don't love running. That would be work. I'm not going to do that on my Shabbat. I might hike. I might take a nap. I might just be quiet. What a novel idea. So what's restful to me, what's worshipful to God? That's how you decide what to do for Shabbat. And as I close, a couple of words. Alex, you can come on up. Just 3 words I felt like the Lord wanted to give you as we talk about following Jesus to rest, coming to him, imitating our life after him, taking his easy yoke of loving him and loving others, empowered by grace, so that we can enter his rest. 3 words I would want you to consider as you think about following Jesus to rest. One is detach. Detach. On Shabbat, what do you need to detach from? And I would say this, Shabbat is meant to be a day to God, where we commune with him and others. But there's things holding us back from really deep communion. And I want you to ask yourself, what do I need to detach from? Unplug, detach from anything that drives you, defines you, and controls you. Anything that drives you, defines you, or controls you, just detach from those things on Shabbat. Because it's a day to release yourself from the things that are holding you. A practical suggestion might be just taking a little practice of pause throughout the day in your week. There's a great app by John Eldridge called 1 Minute Pause. It just guided rhythms to pause. But what do you need to detach from? Second is rest. We got to detach from the world and we need to rest in Jesus. One Bible commentator said that the word believe in the New Testament, when Jesus says believe in me, it can really rightly translated be relax in me. Where do you need to relax in Jesus? If you're uptight like me and you're a control freak, recovering, God, please help me, then there's a lot that you're grasping onto. Shabbat is a great day to enter into God is God and I'm not, so I can relax. What do you need to do to relax in Jesus? And thirdly, enjoy. Shabbat is about delighting in God and enjoying him. John Piper said, God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in him. So as you think about what you could do for Shabbat, what's one thing that would give you just utter joy in God? Do that thing. Do that. Enter into his rest. And as you, I just want you to close your eyes for a moment. I'm a little bit over, but there's grace. And I just want you to take a moment and ask, Jesus, what are you inviting me into? Ask him what he wants to invite you into his rest. And just take a moment. Listen for his voice. Jesus might just be inviting you to a whole new set of rhythms of grace where you make slowing down and resting in him a priority. He might invite you to do something that's just so counterintuitive to your personality that you wonder if it's the voice of the Lord. What's he inviting you to detach from? What's he inviting you to enjoy in him? So, Father, right now I'm asking that you, as you speak to your people, that you would see the heavy burdens that we're carrying. And Father, I pray that we collectively and individually can exchange our burdens, which are so heavy, for your easy yoke, which is so light. May we take on the yoke of our Rabbi by loving you and loving people, a yoke of grace that empowers us. We want to follow you to rest. We want to lead out of rest so that we can have perseverance to run this race. So would you lighten the load right now in Jesus' name? Would you lighten people's load, God, as we exchange our heavy stuff for what you are inviting us into? Yeah. Even just imagine releasing and putting down your burden at the foot of the cross. What does it look like for you to yoke yourself to Jesus, to find rest for your souls? Let me bless you with this blessing from 2 Thessalonians 3:16. Now may the Lord of Shalom himself give you deep, lasting shalom at just the right time that you need it and in every way that you need it. The Lord be with you.